Hello, I am Toria Taylor, and I studied the factors affecting firearm death rates in the United States. So this has been a big deal these past few years. There's been so many mass shootings within the past decade, and they're rising in numbers of people killed. As far as October 27th, 2018, 11 dead. Santa Fe on May 18th, 10 dead. February 14th was Parkland, 17 dead. June 12th, Orlando, Florida, for 9 dead. And I know this clicks in many minds, and everybody knows no matter where they live in the United States, it rings a bell, at least one of these mass shootings. And these aren't even half or even a fraction of, or like 25% of all of the mass shootings that's happened within the past decade. These are just the ones that I have heard of, and I've heard of others, but um, and they definitely don't hurt just the victims killed, but their families and the cities that it occurs in. And I just think that it was such a big deal. And so it was important for me to study this and analyze this because it's important to me as well. And I think it's very interesting to learn about. So, for some background knowledge, it's been increasing as numbers, as I said before. So, there's 39,773 total gun deaths in 2017, and that was the most since at least 1968, the earliest year for which the CDC has online data. The United States took second in highest number of firearm related deaths, just below Brazil, and that was in 2016. Three-quarters of all US murders in 2017 involved a firearm, and then in that same year, about half of all suicides involved a gun. These are not outdated results. These were just in the past few years. So there has to be some change and something that's going on that's forcing these numbers to go up. This graph is from the Pew Research Center. They basically are saying that within these past few years, the numbers have been going up and in gun suicide and gun murder rates after they were declining in the late 1990s, but they have resurfaced and going back up. The American Psychological Association has an article where they explain a lot of different factors that can come into play in this. And they talk about mental illnesses, they talk about firearm prohibitions, gun legislation, and culture and gender, and a lot of different factors that can come into play whenever it comes to gun death rates. And this just says that firearm prohibitions have shown an association to a decrease in gun death rates and have been shown to reduce violence. Some of the examples they've used, I've only included two, but the first one talks about the child access prevention laws, which when an adult does not have a safe place for their firearm and there's children in the house, they could be responsible for that. And so, with that act in place, then that actually has shown to decrease unintentional shootings of children and suicides of adolescents. The second one talks about more of domestic violence. So when people have a domestic violence restraining order against them or a domestic violence misdemeanor, they are not allowed by federal law to purchase any firearm or ammunition. A research to date indicates that firearm restrictions for persons subject to such laws have reduced intimate partner homicides by 6% to 19%. So, gun legislation like these, other sources are saying that there is an association and that there are findings to show that gun legislation is tied to less gun deaths or violence. So, some examples of gun legislation are background checks, waiting periods, prohibiting violent offenders from purchasing, just as we saw in the last slide. And to reduce mass shootings, these acts were put in place. The ban of assault weapons not anymore, but it used to from 1994 to 2004. And also banning large capacity magazines has been talked about as well. So, based on this information from other sources, I think that the right hypothesis to take would be states who pass more gun legislation experience a decrease in gun deaths. So, my dependent variable is gun death rating, and my independent variables are gun law ranking, mental health ranking, unemployment rating, and urbanization percent. So, all of my variables are interval and Um, they go by very different scales, like gun laws and mental health are ranked, and unemployment and urbanization are either percent or rating, and gun death is rating. And so this can be a little complicated, and I go into a lot more information in the paper. But basically, whenever it comes to gun law ranking, whenever it is a one or a two or a small rank, then that means that they are more strict and they have more gun legislation put in place. So one is California, and so they have the most gun legislation. They're the most strict with possession of guns. And then if it's like 50, then they have like the least amount of gun legislation. They're more lenient. With mental health, it's kind of the opposite. Whenever it comes to one, which is Hawaii, they have the least amount of illnesses in mental health and they have the most access to care. And whenever it's 50, that means they have the most mental health illnesses in that state and they barely have any care for mental health. Urbanization studies how much of that state is kind of clustered together and how much of it is urban areas like St. Louis or Kansas City, and how close people are together to each other. And so I feel like that might have a correlation with gun death rates as well. For unemployment rating, it just shows how many people in each state are unemployed. And so I feel like that might be related to like poverty or like how people are struggling in their lives, and that might have cause a correlation between gun death rating as well. So this is my sample data. You can see on the left that all of the states are listed. Not You can't see all of them, but it does show all 50 states. So my sample size would be 50. And gun law ranking, gun death rate, mental health ranking, they're all interval. And the states on the left are ranked as far as the gun law ranking right next to it. So I did OLS, which is ordinary least squares, to gather a linear regression analysis. The R square that I got was 0.626, which means that approximately 63% of variance is explained by my model. Statistical significance of regression model was zero point zero 0.00, which is good because it's less than 0.05. And then when we talk about beta, for all of my variables, I did all my variables except one, I did have a positive relationship for. So for every 1 unit increase in gun law ranking, there's a 0.194 increase in gun death rating in my dependent variable. And in mental health ranking, if there's 1% increase, then there's a 0.1 increase in gun death rating. And with 1 unit increase in unemployment, there's a 0.483 increase in gun death rating. And for every increase or every 1 unit increase in urbanization, there is a decrease in 0.063 in gun death rates. And you can see that with the T scores and the significance, and that all of my variables are significant except for urbanization. Checking for multicollinearity, you can see that in the VIF, there's no scores that are like 3 or higher, so there isn't any strong signs of multicollinearity. This is my regression table. You can see that gun law ranking was at the coefficient was at a 99% significant level. Mental health was at 95, unemployment was at 90, and the constant was at 90 as well, and urbanization was not significant. And there's 50 states. R squared was 0.626. And I don't know if I said this before, but um, like I wasn't doing by country. Every state is involved and has a different piece of data for their own. So due to these results, there is a positive relationship between gun law rankings and gun death rates that is significant. So I accept the hypothesis, and states with more gun legislation experience less gun deaths. So what can also be done? There are many more variables I could have used with this analysis that could have showed a lot more information, because even after, I still have a lot of questions that could answer a lot of my questions about what affects gun death rates. So I could have tried to get into the political side, trying to see how politics in these past couple years might have increased the gun death rates, um, um, or a state's political identity, the amount of diversity within each state might, and I could have gathered the general crime, including nonviolent crime per state, not just gun death rates per state. And I could have also looked up the general efficiency of each state's law enforcement. I know that's hard to get data from, and I'd have to look into the specifics of that. But I think that the efficiency of the law enforcement in a state can have a large effect on criminalization and possibly gun death rates in that state as well. I also saw this article on the Washington Post, and they had a graph for mass shootings fatalities in the US. Now, assault weapons were prohibited from 1994 to 2004, and that is shown in this gray box right here in the middle of the graph. And you can see that rates did decrease, but as the Post says, they also fell after the ban expired in 2004. One federally funded study of the ban found that the effect on violence was insignificant, partly because it was full of loopholes. Now, I personally think that this might have had an effect, but if it wasn't full of loopholes, we couldn't get any answer from that. But I could go into studying how assault weapons like took place and how what was the outlash from that ban and what were the immediate reactions whenever the ban was lifted. And I wanted to find more information on the effects of banning those weapons and the effects of the mass shootings after it lifted as well, even though it says it's dropped. um, if it's true, then mass shootings may drop gun death rates as well today.